Well, is 11% return on your money pique your interest? Today, why you need to know that other side of the story. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, an alarming trend is happening in Texas. Taking a look back since 2019, pre-pandemic, Texas is up 77% when it comes to creditors filing lawsuits against those consumers who had defaulted on debt. We're going to talk a lot about that today. We're also going to talk about the 11% return that almost seems kind of guaranteed. Is it a legit investment deal here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or is it something you need to be really skeptical about? We'll be talking about that. In the meantime, if you've got questions for me, I'd love to hear them. Just go to prudentmoney.com. Go to the top of the web page and you will see a link. Just click through, send in your question, and I will get that answered for you. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Well, as I said at the beginning of the program, an alarming trend is happening in Texas, and it has to do with creditors filing lawsuits against those consumers who have defaulted on debt. Now, that's typically when you start looking at lawsuits and that part of the debt collection process, you're talking credit card debt. And today, I believe the number, at least the last one that I heard, was that Americans are in $1.25 trillion in debt. Now, they play around statistically with inflation rates and what it was in 2008 when there was a really horrible credit card crisis. And they say, well, that's still a little bit worse than today's. I would say put all that aside. Today's is probably as bad or worse than what happened in 2008. And we're only at the very beginning of this whole thing. Plus, interest rates were nowhere near the levels that they're exceeding today, where you could have upper 20s to lower 30 percentile interest rates on your debt, where back in 2008, you could still get high interest rates, don't get me wrong, but not quite like that. So this story is a reminder to those of you who are in debt, who have a lot of debt, a lot of credit card debt especially, and you're tempted just to walk away from it. Biggest mistake that you could make, and has a lifetime of things you're going to have to deal with because you defaulted on that debt. So talk a little bit about that today and what you need to know. What are some of the stories that are important for you to know about and the questions that you need to ask? I think the first place to start is a debt that goes bad. How does that happen? Well, first of all, you accumulate debt, and this is the typical consumer does, accumulates debt on a credit card, gets up to the credit limit, maybe exceeds the credit limit once in a while, gets charged a fee for it, and they've gotten to a point where they've got so much credit card debt, they're barely making the minimum payments. They end up missing a payment, and then they go a second month with missing a payment. And at some point, of course, at this point, your creditors, let's say the Bank of America, we'll use as an example, and you have a Visa card with Bank of America. It's at this point that they're probably after the first 30 days, they're giving you a call. They'll give you that 30-day grace period. Most of them will. And they'll charge a fee, of course, a late fee, $30, $35, $40, depending on the credit card issuer. But once you get past that 30 days and you get into 60 days, then they start to really take action and get somewhat aggressive, just assuming maybe that you're going to default on that credit card debt. Well, what ends up happening is that as the months go by and at this point, you're dealing with the credit card company, and you're getting further and further deeper into problems, and you get to a point then to where there's absolutely no way that you can make this work. And so what they do is they put you into default. Now, typically, a credit card company, let's say Bank of America as an example. Bank of America will take your debt and they'll give it to a debt collector, an outside third-party debt collector. That debt collector will start to contact you and attempt to collect a debt. And in the fashion of most debt collectors, they'll call you around the clock. They'll harass you. Through 34 years of working with people as a financial advisor, I've heard all kinds of stories. And they're designed to scare you into paying that debt back. So what ends up happening is that, number one, they inflate the debt by all these bogus fees. Most of the time, the amount of debt they say you owe could not even be backed up in a court of law by documents. And they would state the fees that are being charged, why those fees are being charged, and the reason why that they can actually charge those fees. And so this debt gets so big that the debt collector is not getting anywhere with you. Then they have a choice. They stop trying to collect the debt. They send it back to the original credit card company. And the credit card company has the choice of either sending either a new third-party debt collector out with the debt, or they will sell that debt to a debt buyer. Now, this is where you have to really understand how the process works. If Bank of America says, "Okay, we're going to sell this debt. We're tired of dealing with them. We want it off our books. We're tired of dealing with this consumer." And when they get it off of the books, they can write it off and go forward. And I'm not sure what the percentage is of that amount of debt that's just written off like that, but it's a pretty big percentage because Bank of America gets to a point where it's not really worth their time. And besides, if you look at with high interest rate debt, how much money that they have made on that particular debt through the years, they're probably more than likely in a situation where they're really not losing money by selling it and getting pennies on the dollar for the debt. So this debt buyer owns that debt, and the Bank of America does not own that debt. You could call Bank of America all day long, and they're not going to be able to tell you anything about a debt they don't own. So you'll definitely get a call from the debt buyer, and you a representative of the debt buyer, and the debt buyer owns your debt. Remember, they paid pennies on the dollar for it. So if it's $20,000 worth of credit card debt that they say you owe, they might have paid $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever on it, and now they have the opportunity to make really good money. But let's say that you don't answer your phone, you don't return their calls, you ignore their letters, their notices, and it comes at this point where the debt buyer is in a situation where they have to make a choice. And you can see you always get to these choices that you put the debt buyer or the original creditor into a corner, and they say either you pay or we're going to file a lawsuit against you and seek to get that as a way to get repayment of the debt. And so the way all this process works, many times the consumer doesn't even know that a lawsuit's been filed. It doesn't come. It could come in the mail. From what I understand, it can't even. It's not like you're being served papers. And so really, through the years, this process of a debt buyer, whomever owns the debt, filing a lawsuit is a pretty easy process. But that's the problem with it. Like the consumer has the ability to send the debt collector, debt buyer, whomever owns the debt, a letter that says, I want you to cease and desist all collection activity on this debt that you say that I owe. If they get that letter, that's when they have to say, either by choice they say that they're going to file a lawsuit, or by that letter they can't continue collecting by law. Now, a lot of them still do, and they're breaking the laws, specifically the Fair Debt Act, which is actually one of the best pieces of consumer legislation that I've ever come across. It was written, I believe, back in the 70s. But if they continue collecting, they're violating the law. Most people don't know that. But if they get that cease and desist letter, they're supposed to stop collection activity. And now they send you a letter telling you your choices, either pay or you face potential legal problems through a lawsuit. Here's the problem, though, is that the whole idea is to keep your debt out of the court systems, to keep from getting sued on this debt. The lawsuit is what you want to avoid, because here's the thing: in the state of Texas, and by the way, I'm not an attorney, nor am I trying to play one on the radio. In the state of Texas, they have, once you default on a debt, they have 4 years to collect that debt. The statute of limitations, 4 years to collect that debt. After that 4 years have run out, they have no legal ways to enforce the payment of that debt. In other words, after that statute of limitation runs out, that means they can't file a lawsuit. And that can always be your defense if they try. And many of them still do try. And most people, once again, don't know what you know because you listen to Prudent Money. So if you can get through that 4-year period, and it's not easy, but I write about this in my book, Deceptive Money. And I'm not trying to teach how to get out of paying a debt. If you owe the debt, you should pay the debt back. I'm just trying to teach you how to deal with these debt collectors and how to deal with the process that it can be very tough, both emotionally and emotionally draining. And if you don't know how the system works, then it's even more scary. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. We are up against a break, so stick around, and I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. We're talking about the last thing that you would ever want to do is to get yourself into a lawsuit situation. And what I was saying earlier, is I write about this in my book, Deceptive Money, is to stay out of the court systems the best you can, because the more that you can prolong that debt past that 4-year period, then you have the law on your side, and you're in a much better situation. But here's the thing: if you owe the debt today, you always owe the debt, and so that's why I can continue to keep showing up on your credit reports even after the time that they allow for creditors to post that on your credit report is long gone. They'll still end up filing it on your credit report, and you have to get it removed. You basically have to stay up on top of it. So how bad of a situation is this as far as trends go? Well, they say that 77% increase when it comes to debtors filing lawsuits against those consumers who have defaulted on debt. that really comes out to, if you look at the statistics, is consider that there are roughly 22 million people over the age of 18 in the state of Texas. And roughly this trend is involving 515,000 people. So if you look at 515,000 people versus 22 million people over the age of 18, we're not talking about a huge number by any stretch. So, a lot of it, 77%, of course, got my attention, brings the reader in, gets them involved in the article, and I think this is really an alarming situation that's gotten out of control. I think that there's so much debt out there that debt collectors and debt buyers can go after, that there is a chance that you'll kind of get lost in the debt collection process and never have a lawsuit filed against you. But like I said, once they get that lawsuit filed, I believe it lasts for 10 years on your credit report, and then they have the ability to renew it for another 10 years. What goes on your credit report and what they have to where they can actually garnish your wages, garnish your bank accounts, is a judgment against you. And that's what you want to avoid. And today's program is not about how to avoid that and getting into all that, but we'll follow up with more and talk about that. But the Pew Charitable Trust says the average lawsuit is about $4,000. And that's really interesting, because you would think that they would be filing the vast majority of these lawsuits on people who are owning, they're down $20,000, $25,000 in debt. But regardless, the bottom line is you do not want a default judgment, and you want to make sure that you get that debt past that statute of limitations period, and which is 4 years in the state of Texas. And by the way, each state has its own statute of limitations period. And make sure that you stay out of the court systems. If you have to get an extra job and work a few hours every day, whatever it takes to keep that debt in good standings. Because once it gets into this process, the debt collection process, it's like drowning. Every little bit you lose more control and more control until you drown. It just sneaks up on you. That's what you want to be careful about. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Well, the regulatory agencies and the SEC all have rules and limitations and regulations as to what you can do and can't do when you're advertising a security, a situation where you're trying to pique the interest or get the interest of people who might invest into what you're selling. And so they've got very strict rules. Now, the rules that apply to me, because I am a registered investment advisor, I'm licensed, and are a whole lot stricter than a person who's does not have those licenses. And so what ends up happening is there are a loose set of security exemptions, and gives them a little bit more of a latitude of what they can say and what they can do. But it amazes to me as I read through this what the implication, what the advertising implies. So what you typically see is some kind of a big development that you can invest up to as little as $20,000 into the development, and they get a big name celebrity or athlete that everybody knows, everybody loves, to partner with them on this and to help advertise the story. So I happened to catch a glimpse of this particular development on a TV ad, and this celebrity got up and said, you could make 11% on your money. Now, if you love this celebrity and you very interested in making 11% because you're scared about the market imploding, big bear market cycle, a big stock market crash, getting your money out of the market, maybe putting into this development because your big time celebrity is endorsing it, is somewhat of something that you want to definitely look into. And so you got to remember, though, that most people interpret statements about return as they want to hear it, that they want it to be true. 11% on your money. I mean, I've seen situations or come across situations on Dallas, Texas radio, on AM stations, where this one gentleman one afternoon bounced around from station to station advertising I think a 12% rate of return on your money. All you have to, and it was he even went as far as guaranteeing it. What was so interesting to me is that this gentleman was not even registered. And you got to be registered to be doing what he's doing. So he's already broken that law. And the investment was not registered. And so that he was breaking two laws. He was getting on the airwaves and saying all this as if a regulator would not even hear them. And eventually got busted. I believe he's serving time now. But people who are advertising these securities and these investments, these 11%, 12%, whatever returns, are doing so because they know the emotional attachment to returns that are guaranteed that they can live off of. And what's even more unique about this particular, well, not unique, but they really pushed the limit on this. And by the way, let me back up and say that from what I remember, there was no disclaimers or on this particular commercial. This commercial came across as if you will make 11% on your money. And basically what that means is they're going to pay you 11% back of your money. That doesn't mean you get your principal back, but you'll get 11% until maybe you run out of money unless they have money to replace it. So it can be a very bad situation, but I'll get to that. They have what's called an optional buyback. It's advertised as almost a guarantee a certain number of years, like 5, 10, and 15, that they will buy back the percentage that you have invested, give you your money back. Of course, they don't tell you that doesn't. Sure, there's a guaranteed buyback, but they may only give you $1 back. So the ad goes on to say guaranteed tax-advantaged passive income. Tax advantage being, and that's true, but tax advantage being a big selling point. 11% annual returns paid monthly. There's no asterisk by this. It's just, this is off the website. Pro rata project depreciation, backed by a New York Stock Exchange company. Guaranteed buybacks, of course, at each 5, 10, and 15 years. And they even put numbers down by year 5, 22,000, year 10, 24,000, year 15, 26,000. Now, this is only available to people who are what are referred to as accredited investors. So they have to have a certain net worth or a certain income, amount of income that they earn. But just because someone's got a certain net worth doesn't make them financially smart in being able to interpret these particular situations. I know there's many people who are wealthy that struggle with money in understanding what it all means than those who are probably just getting by. So don't let that fool you. So the offering of, and here's finally, I was going through the website and came across this disclaimer. It would just look like fine print. It didn't jump out and say, read me because you may be sorry. And it had an asterisk by it, but I couldn't find an asterisk anywhere else within the confines of the website. So very, very loose in following the regulations, but it doesn't matter if they're there to sell property and they're there to sell parts of this development. They are doing whatever they need to do to get your interest. But here it is. Any projections or potential returns in this advertisement are estimated predictions of performance only and are not based on actual results and are not guarantees of future results. Estimated projections do not represent or guarantee the actual results of any transaction, and no representation is made that any interest in a part of this development or is likely to achieve results or profits similar to those shown. So they're saying, hey, this is what we wish to happen. This is what could happen. If all the stars lined up, yeah, maybe so. But I just think people are entering into a dangerous relationship with, number one, a company that would loosely advertise like this. And number two, sure, they're probably, I don't know the securities laws on this side of the table as well as I probably should, but they're probably sticking as close as they can to these particular laws. But they're clearly, this marketing leads people to believe, and investors to believe, or could lead people to believe, that we're talking guaranteed returns of 11% a month, or 11% of annual returns, and a pretty risk-free deal. Just read the fine print. And basically the fine print is basically saying, if this thing crashes and burns, you signed on to, you're okay with it. If you lose all your money, you signed up that you're okay with it, and you accept that everything in here is nothing but a fantasy unless it comes true, and nothing in the past predicts that it will come true. So shines a little bit different light onto it. Just buyer beware and be careful. This is Bob Brooks saying you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.